Life is good. We have been so blessed because we've got four wonderful sons and they married wonderful girls, and we have 12 grandchildren, and we have at this moment 13 great grandchildren, and life is good. Life is good. My earliest memories of him are seeing a little boy just running around up and down the street. He had white, his hair was just almost white, real curly. And, he was close to my age, I guess. I don't remember really thinking about that, but he was just there. He was part of the neighborhood. We lived on one block of Carr Street that was like it was a neighborhood, and it was like a little city of its own. And so almost everybody knew everybody on that block. And I just remember him being there. Um, so, and for a while, we would play until it got almost dark, and then all our parents would be calling us in.
Yeah.
So, remember playing hide and go seek and whatever other young childhood games that people play. I was more of a spectator of the rest of them than a participant, because I was shy even then.
We got to messing around with Mary Catherine Walker and Gary Cooper, who was our friend, and he invited us to go dancing way out on Park Avenue at Getwell on Friday night. We did that for several months, and the boys at 10 or 11 o'clock at nighttime, they would separate from the girls, and the boys would go outside and sleep in their cars, and the girls would sleep inside the house. And then we'd go home the next morning. That's the way we worked. But that's what we did, and I was 16, 17, 18 years old when we were doing that. I remember buying Miss Ann's ring when I first got that at a jewelry store on Madison Avenue. And I don't remember what I paid for the ring, but it didn't make any difference. I just took it and said, okay, I can make payments on it. So every week I'd make a payment on it. I worked in a print shop, and every week the guy told me I had to pay $40 or whatever it was, and pretty soon I paid it off and I got the ring. And I kept the ring for, I guess, about a month in my car. And then one day I asked her to marry me, and I gave her the ring. That was it. It was a fast-moving world. That was in 1954, 55, and we got married in 1955. 56, I'm sorry. Oh, you know everything, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, then,
When Joel first asked me for a date, I said no. And then I thought, what am I doing? I'm sitting here doing nothing, is what I'm doing. I wasn't dating anyone. And so he asked me again, and I said, okay. And at that time, we lived on a street called Philadelphia, which was real close to, actually,
right.
We were both in high school and had to ride the bus to school, but my house at that time was very close to Fairview Junior High. Not that that matters, but anyway, we walked to the Memphian, which was our neighborhood theater down on Cooper near Union. It was between Union and Madison.
We walked from that place on
back.
Philadelphia to the Memphian Theater.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was
That's
that
about
far?
a mile and a half, 2 miles.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it is still a theater,
Right.
not for films, but for plays. They, and I think they've changed it, remodeled it and stuff. It's, we have 2 or 3 theaters in that area. That's the arts area of town. Anyway, we walked down there to see a movie. I do not remember what the movie was, but then he would just, we just started dating a good bit, not every week or anything, but, and talk on the phone. And it was later that fall that we started the dance party thing. And I think we went all summer and then all through our senior year. I think it was more time than he was remembering, because we did a lot of picnics, and we would go to some of the lakes around the area.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
And things like that. And most of the time, we all went home at the end of the evening.
Right.
But this particular time, I was going to spend the night with Betty Van Landingham. She lived over off of Lamar. And, but that was the night that we decided to cruise South Parkway. And we did see Elvis that night, quite late. And in the meantime, his mother called Betty's mother and said, "Do you have any idea where they are?" And of course, Betty's mother did not. But so when we got home, to Betty's house, she said, "You're in trouble." And so we were somewhat in trouble. I don't remember what the punishment was, but it wasn't horrible, whatever. Probably grounded for a couple of weeks or something like that. And we weren't bad. I'll put it that way. We were not bad kids. And we had a crowd of 8 or 10, I guess, something like that. There was never any drinking. The biggest thing that anybody did was smoke cigarettes, and the girls didn't do that, just the guys, some of them. And so, looking back on it, I'm very thankful that wasn't popular then, because
Right.
we could have been in trouble just like anybody. But it was fun. We had so much fun. And it was great for me, because my life at home was not terrible at all, but I had spent most of my life taking care of kids. And he was gone 25 months. So that in itself, that was right on the beginning of our marriage. And so that in itself created a situation where we really had to get to know each other again, because in 25 months, you change a lot.
Yep.
I had a baby and was responsible for him, and he was on the other side of the world learning what he needed to learn to do what he did the rest of his work life. And so it wasn't easy. That early years were not easy. And, but we made it through. We're still here.
I think that when you choose to get married, you choose a partner and you make a commitment within yourself to be there for a long time. And Miss Ann and I have been together now for 64 years.
Hello, pretty woman. This picture takes us back a long time. I've been loving you ever since this day, and even before that, and I still love you.
Well, I'm most grateful for being at this age, 83 years. I like my wife very much. I like the way we've bought houses and raised children. I think she's great, but I'm not as great as she is. I'm just kind of like her puppy dog. Well, my hobbies over the years have always been pertaining to something in woodworking. I would like to have been more amenable in making other things in woodworking that I made. I enjoyed making yard furniture. About me trying to be a better person, the whining of the saw blade cutting through wood makes me be a better person. I like that part. Now, part about me being Joel, well, I would try to do something different and be more responsive to my health care, to my wife, and the children we raised. My plans for the future? Well, I would like to say that I would like to get back involved with some little boys in my neighborhood to teach them about woodworking, which I did at one time. I would also like to be able to get my wife excited to go out to dinner with me more frequently. And I get rid of all my girlfriends, even though, come on, that's it. Biggest hardship we'd overcome? Probably going through depression more than 10 or 20 times because over the years, having been in the printing business, I worked for about 20 different printing companies and I was fired from most of them. But when I opened my own business in 1974, the people that fired me were my customers. But I was fired from some of those businesses because I would help clean up the floor or clean up the shop because most of the printing shops in the early 50s and 60s were just dirt holes. And I was trying to help those people improve their business, but it didn't work. So I would do a better thing if I could go back and do it again. You could remember about me? Well, the fact that I was always honest. I gave money away to people. I helped people buy their houses, my sons. I would like to say that I didn't steal anything. I don't drink. I'm not a hobbyist. I don't run around on my wife. And I don't have any dogs or cats to compete with because I kind of like my wife. Passionate about being healthy, being financially well off, being able to converse with certain people, but I would like to be able to get back more into woodworking in my shop. Something is going on in my mind today that makes me not want to go to the shop. I do, I blame it on the weather because at this time of the year in January 2019 here, the weather changes and my body doesn't want to go out into cold weather. So I'm more passionate about being want to get into warmer weather and do that. And my passion for being able to talk to people, that's the most important thing for me. Yes, I have regrets. You mentioned the fact that a few of them would be the fact that some of the people I worked with and some of the things I had to put up with, some of the tools I bought broken and wore out, some of the trucks and cars we've owned. I would not do that again. I've come to a conclusion that my success has been because of the passion of what I've wanted. I'd like to be able to continue on doing a video here because I don't see too many of the younger grandchildren, the great-grandchildren that we have in our world today, because they are part of the Hairston clan. Oh, my especially proud of, yes, the fact that I can read, the fact that I can use a computer, the fact that I can do this video, the fact that I can get along with all my family. I would like to be more involved with some other older men and women, but that's the thing I said before, that we're parted by the electronic age. We keep looking at the television set, which in my opinion, the television set is the worst invention we've ever made because it has become a mind washing machine and they're not using soap. Well, I used to know Joy, but I mean, you want to talk about another Joy. Um, my passion, my passion for Joy would be the foods I eat, being with my wife out and dining, being with my children, meeting with my family. That's the passion of Joy I like. That's what I really like. Of course, once again, I don't have any dogs and cats to converse with, so I look for the human being to be Joy with. Learn to read. Set your cell phone aside, learn to read. Learn how to use the vowels A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. You won't see that too many times on the cell phone. Get a partnership with a friend. Keep in touch with that friend. Don't delay in going out with them. Don't get mad at them. Join a church, join an organization, be with human beings. Don't live out in the boondocks with dogs and cats, and cows and chickens. My father influenced me in the worst way in the sense that he was an alcoholic. He worked for the Commercial Appeal and the Press Cemetery in Memphis, Tennessee. This was way back in the 1948 to 53. He would come home at late, 4 o'clock in the morning, wake me up and talk to me and slap me around. I didn't like that. I just couldn't put up with him. I didn't like him. One morning in 1952, I hit him in the head with a skillet. My mother always hit him in the head with a pan whenever he'd bit on me. I hit him in the head with a skillet, knocked him out, got dressed up in clothes, got on my bicycle, went out on Airways in Memphis, Tennessee, and got involved in a church where there's a graveyard, and I slept in a graveyard for a while. I wake up every morning, kind of get a little cleaned up there, and go to Fairview Junior High School, get out of high school, and go back to the graveyard. That's what it was. I did not like my father at all. He was a brute, an alcoholic, and a dismissing human error. I don't know why my mother married him. Oh, my mother. My mother was the greatest thing in the world. She was very passionate. She taught me how to dress. She taught me how to read, even though she only had a 7th grade education. My mother was an investor. She bought houses, bought buildings in Cooper Young area, Memphis, Tennessee. My mother helped me get through school. I remember in 1945, my mother wanted me to grow long hair. I was only 10 years old. So we started growing long hair. She'd comb it and wash it, and that's what she liked to do. It was blonde hair, and it grew long. I grew a ponytail. And when I got in Fairview Junior High School, the ponytail was knitting. She would knit it up, and my brother, I would come home and complain to him that the boys would pull on my ponytail. My brother worked at a shoe manufacturing company. They also made tents. He made me a set of brass knuckles and gave it to me and showed me how to use it. And I'd go back to Fairview Junior High School. When those boys would pull on my hair, I'd whack them. So the guy's name that was the principal there, J.G. Griesbeck, he wanted the brass knuckles. And I said, no, I have to have this. He said, I want them knuckles. No. So I went home and told my mother about it. She went back to school with me and said, he's not going to give you the brass knuckles. Why don't you get those boys that's pulling his hair? So after that, we went to a haircut place. They wouldn't cut my hair because it was long. They thought I was, the wrong kind of gender. So we went across the street to a salon, a woman's haircutting salon. They cut the hair off. My mother had it put in a bag. We went back across the street. My mother went in the room there where the barber shop was, and she dumped all the hair on the floor, and she said, this is the hair that you wouldn't cut on my sons. Goodbye. And that was the last time I was there. So I grew hair, and that was it. It was just a fun thing. My mother was the most responsive thing in my life, and my brothers were too. But my sisters, they were kind of like tattletales. They told on me everything I did. My mother, she would have to get an objective to me to say that, don't do that anymore. I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. Like today, I don't know if I'm doing anything wrong or not, but I like to be in an adult situation. Oh, my dad, although he was the economic status of my family, my dad, although he was an alcoholic, he came home with a $200 or $300 check every Monday morning. He was paid at Commercial Appeal. My mother took it and put it in the bank, and that's where she got the investment. So we were probably the wealthiest family when we lived on Carr Street in Memphis, Tennessee. Then we moved to Evelyn Avenue over near the Parkway. We're still the richest family. So that's how I learned to do my investment, how she was doing. We had everything we wanted. My mother bought couches and chairs. We had cars. I taught my mother how to drive, incidentally. And we're very well off. My sisters always had good looking clothes to go to school with, and that's what we did because of the economy situation that my mother built. My mother built that for us. My family doing something for fun was a rarity. I do know that my mother, she liked to go to the fairgrounds. At sometime in September, we always had an open circus or an open day there at the fairgrounds. That's about the only thing we did together. There was nothing there to have a creativity to the football or baseball. I didn't get involved in any of that. My mother didn't do any of that. My dad rarely ever talked to me at all. He just wanted to slap me around. My brothers, they didn't get involved in sports. They did sometimes take me riding with them in their cars. That's about all I did. I remember dodging the Korean War because at that particular time, you were supposed to sign in to go to the military. Well, I was 17 years old, so that's one of the reasons I ran away from home, because I didn't want to sign in. I didn't want anything to do with the Army. I worked there with the printing plants, and that was it. I worked at Tech High School in the print shop, and my friends Carl Nelson and Bennett Anderson and Jack Gammon, we all became linotype operators. That's what we did, and we were well trained by the school teacher there at Tech High School. So in 1955 or 54, I met my wife, and we started going to dancing classes. I went out on Park Avenue, and we'd dance on Friday and Saturday night, and go home Sunday morning. And I enjoyed that very much. It was really nice. Then, because I didn't like the military, I got fired from a job in 1956, and I was so mad. My friend Bill Lott was with me. He was mad also. So we joined the Army. Now that was the dumbest thing I've ever done, to join the Army, which I hated. So I went to Japan, he went to France. So we'd write each other a letter so often. I wrote Miss Ann a lot of letters from there. I bought a lot of little trinkets and little toys, little statues and glass blow-up things. They're over in a cabinet. When I got out of the military, I said, "To heck with this. I'll never do that again." I remember talking to some lieutenant or something near the end of my time for the military. He was trying to say, "You got to re-enlist." I said, "Fellow, I don't have to re-enlist." He said, "I'm not a fellow. You call me lieutenant." I said, "I can call you anything I want to. This is my last day here. Have a nice day." And my other friend, Wally Shako, came out to see me after I got out of the military. Came out to see me after we bought our house on Denison. I gave him all my military clothes, boots and belts and everything. Take them, get out. I got rid of everything the Army had, and even today, I don't like the Army because it's not run like a business. It's run like corporate. You will do what I tell you to when I tell you to. And there's no decision from the younger generation, the privates and the corporals. They can't help the Army. Only the sergeants, the lieutenants, and the generals can do it. Just like the politicians today, you can't do anything but vote for the politician that's running. And even though you vote for that person doesn't do what you want to do. I am in favor of having a woman be for president, but I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. That's what I liked. And it's just me. I'm open-minded. I don't get tied up into too many conversations of religion or politics. I can talk about both religion, both subjects. But it's just that when you're in the printing business, you read all this, specifically if you're a linotype operator. Linotype operators read everything. And you're working on this great big giant keyboard, and these letters are coming down. It's hot and smelly and stinks in a print shop anyway. And I don't know why I got in the print shop business, but I did. That goes on and on, but that's just part of my story, and that was the question you asked me. I hope that some of the answers I've given you here are good answers, and that they're not going to be edited out. Well, in 1942, that's when the World War II got started, that I remember. I was at Idlewild elementary school, and I got hit by a car at Cooper and Peabody, so I had to stay in a hospital bed for about 6 or 8 months. So I failed the first grade, and World War II kept on coming on, and I remember hearing my brothers talk about how the Germans were coming across the continent of Europe, taking on France and Italy. I didn't like that. And then the World War II ended in about 1947, 48. And after that, it just stuck in my mind that I didn't like the military at all. So that's why I was telling you about my mistake of joining the Army in 1956. That was a bad mistake on my behalf. You want to know what the first credit card I ever had was? A folded dollar bill. I bought it. I'm before the days of the credit card. I'm before the days of the automatic camera. I'm before the days of the digital camera. I want a Kodak camera where you had to look down in the lens and push the button like that. I like that camera. Then when I was in Korea, I lived in Japan and Korea in 57, 59, I bought a lot of cameras. And I've given those to one of my grandchildren. So her name is Rebecca. In today's world, like this video we're making here, this is done with a little tiny camera, not much bigger than a package of cigarettes, and it's all electronic. The sound of my voice is being recorded. The view of my handsome face is being recorded. And it's just a nice thing to do. I wish I'd been able to do that in 1957.
What about,
I remember when I bought my first car, we lived on Carr Street, and in 1950, maybe 51, there was a military base commander at Millington. He lived next door to us. He would loan the Navy military people at Millington money. He'd take their car as collateral. Well, one day the Navy knocked on his door and said, "You're moving to California." Well, he got stuck with 3 cars in his backyard. All of them were Crosley. Now the Crosley car is not made anymore. So he came over to my house and asked my mother, did she want to buy one of the cars? My mother, being an investor, she said, well, let me see the car. He said, they're cars, there's 3 of them. She said, well, how much do you want for all 3 of them? She told her, okay, we tore the fence down, drove the cars in, I cleaned up all the cars, and I drove her car, across the car around the neighborhood. I was 16 years old, and I did pretty good at that. But the Crosley car needs to come back into operation. And then I know that I was teaching my mother how to drive, and she took me up on Cleveland at Union somewhere in about 1952, 53. And she went to a Dodge dealership. And so we got out of the car, we're looking around at big old cars, and I thought, this is ridiculous. She came over to me and said, give him your key. Give him my key. Yeah, I'm trading your car in. You're trading my car in? Yes. So we had to drive home in this great big long, giant 1948 Dodge car. Humongous car. So I taught my mother how to drive in that car. Humongous car. That's what I remember about being young. I never got involved too much into that until, say, about the 1980s or 90s. I couldn't see how you could shoot a rocket from the Earth and go land on the moon. That didn't make much sense to me. But today, I accept it. As a matter of fact, just this week, January in 2019, the Chinese have landed their first rocket on the moon. They've also landed one of those little carts that rides around and takes pictures. So the Chinese have copied off what the United States is, because we've had a little robot running around on the moon for the past 10 to 15 years. I like that. But as far as keeping up with the astronauts, I was kind of surprised when the man got off the rocket and on the moon, walked on the moon and said mankind has got, more things to do. I like that. But I think astronauts today they're different, because we've got robots that do the same thing the astronauts did. But as far as the astronauts, without the astronauts, you wouldn't have your digital cameras, you wouldn't have your timepieces, your wristwatch, you wouldn't have anything, because that kind of technology pushed us forward. And the next step we're going to push forward, we probably need to go and learn how to live underwater. I don't know. Mankind could do that. He's been riding around in a submarine now since about the past 45 years. I remember watching the moon landing. I don't remember the guy's name. I think he died by now. But that was quite a bit of a thing, because how did mankind know to dress that man up in this great big giant uniform with that head thing on, and he could talk to us? How did those people at NASA know how to do that? They had never been on the moon. Those people worked at NASA had no idea what the moon was. All they know is it turns bright at nighttime, and daytime it goes away. It doesn't go away, it just goes on the other side of the sun, but they figured that out. But Galileo figured that out also. Oh my goodness, my brother Bob was the best relative I had. My other brother Calvin died at an early age of 27. That was somewhere in the 1950s. And then I'd like to say my two sisters were good relatives, but somehow or another they want to be too bossy on me in today's world. And as old as I am, I, I can't put up with the bossiness. My relatives was, my father was not favored for me. My mother was really nice. I really liked her. And I had a grandmother that did not speak. She couldn't speak, and she was nice, but she could always do cooking at their house when we lived in Memphis. But my mother was my best relative. I liked her the best of all. He was, my brother Calvin died in an automobile accident in North Carolina. He was selling some kind of an insurance program for different kind of businesses. A business that needed some kind of insurance for something, that's what he sold. I originally remember my brother Calvin. He worked in a tent factory, and he made different things out of tent. And when I had long hair and a pigtail, the boys in school would pull on my hair, and he made me a set of brass knuckles out of the tent material, and I would carry it around, and when the boys would pull my hair, I'd turn around and hit them with the brass knuckles. And that's when the principal at Fairview Junior High School decided that I was going to give him the brass knuckles. And I said, no, I've got to have these because the boys keep on pulling my hair. He said, I want the brass knuckles. I said, no, that's not going to happen. So I went home and told my mother about it. She went back to school with me the next day, and oh, that principal, he got it in the face real bad with her because my mother was very overprotective of her children. So she let that principal know real quick he's not going to give it up. That was a good thing. My mother used to tell me about her, I think it was her father, or maybe it was her grandfather. He was in the steel iron casting business, and he had several molds made out of clay, and he would pour this hot steel. He had his mold machine was in his back shop, in the back of his house, and he light this furnace and put charcoal in it, and he'd get this mold, this metal going real hot, and dip in there with a big scoop and pour it out in these molds, and he's making these ships, which turned out to be doorstops. And he made hundreds of those things, and that's how he made his living. And his wife was a seamstress, and she would make blankets and quilts and things like that. And I think that's where my mother got her ability to be a seamstress also. I worked at a drugstore, and I had a motorcycle, and I would deliver drugs to the people that came around and bought the drugstore, just in an area 2 or 3 blocks from the drugstore itself. And that was my first job, and it was the worst job I've ever had in my life because I didn't know who I was delivering to, and dogs would bark at me, and children would not, children in the house, they would not tolerate the doorbell ringing. It was the worst job I ever had.
How old were you?
I was 14 years old. No, I was 16 years old, 16, because my mother bought the motorcycle for me in 1945. And let's see, no, I'm sorry, I've got my years mixed up here. In 1950, I was 15 years old. That's when I was doing it, 1950. Wow, getting old. It was very quickie in the wedding. My mother did not want us to have to pay a fee to the city of Memphis, Tennessee to get married. And so she found out from someone else about going to Hernando, Mississippi to get married, and it didn't have to cost a fee, you didn't have to get a license, nothing, but you had to pay the pastor. So that's how we did that. My brother attended the wedding. He took pictures of us. My friend Bill Lott attended the wedding, and let's see, Miss Ann's best friend, Betty Van Landingham, attended the wedding, and I think another lady attended the wedding, one of her friends also, Mary Ann, I think her name was.
Captain.
Oh, the honeymoon? Wow, that was a long time ago. That was 64 years ago. I think we went to someplace in Arkansas, Holly Springs or Marianna, Arkansas.
There you go.
My best memory together was dancing before we got married, dancing out on Park Avenue at Mary Catherine's house, and she had a big living room, huge, and we would go out there, Miss Ann and I, and Betty Van Landingham, and two or three other people would go out there with it. We have a party every Friday and Saturday night. And after the boys got, at 10, 11 o'clock at night, instead of going home, we slept outside in the front lawn in the car. That's how we got back and forth. Then we go home in the morning time. We did a dance there called the Bop.
The bop.
Yep, the Bop, that was in the early 50s, and that's really what we liked to do. I liked it a lot because I could dance with almost any girl. I didn't have to hold on to it. You just held on to the hand. I liked that a lot. And the music was very popular. We could buy records, old 78 RPM records. I don't think they're around anymore. There was no videotape or nothing like that in those years. So we had to buy our own record and play it on the player. Oh my goodness. My brother Bob was in the Navy. He came in from, I want to think it was Cuba, but I'm not sure. Some country, and he brought in some goods from those countries. And there was some lanyards and things like that the people made in those countries. And he brought my mother some big bowls made out of wood or something, woodworkers. I remember that. I remember having to listen to the radio about the people that was in the military, what was happening to them. And they were always talking about general this and general that. And I remember going out on Park Avenue on Getwell. At that time, it was called Shotwell. But anyway, that's where the military hospital was. And they changed the name of it from Shotwell to Getwell. And I would go out there and see what some of the soldiers looked like. Some of them missing arms and things like that. That's what I did. That's what I remember of it. No, I didn't meet Elvis. I went to his house one time when I had my printing business to put some kind of paint down on the floor and up on the walls around the ceiling, so when people walked through it, it would sound an alarm. And I remember doing that, and that was in the 70s or maybe 79 or 80, somewhere along there. But anyway, it was a security thing that they provided me with the certain paint and everything. All I had to do was put the screen down on the floor and draw the squeegee across it, and it put the image down on there. Then I had another way, a small paintbrush. I'd connect the floor to the wall, and to each one. They'd go around the wall, up around the ceiling, and they put the two wires on it, connected to some kind of alarm or something like that. But I never met Elvis. I just was in that house one time. Well, it was a case of the communists were trying to control the entire island and country of Korea. Korea was part of China, and just a little peninsula. South Korea was just a little peninsula coming off the edge of the continent there, of China. And we fought the war there. And in actuality, in my opinion today is, we built another empire, another country, because today, in the 2019, you get your cars and your computers and your watch bands and everything from South Korea. So we really built another empire. But I remember running away from home because I didn't want to go to the war in Korea. But then in 1956, I'd been fired from a job, a linotype operator, and met my friend Bill Lott, and we joined the Army. And I was already married at that time. So I went to Japan, he went to Germany. And I worked around on printing presses there, repaired printing presses, and I'd ship back and forth between Korea and Japan, riding boats and sometimes flying on helicopters. Some of those helicopters looked like a big banana, had a propeller in the front and one in the back, and they really were nothing but just cargo planes, but they would fly from Korea back to Japan, let me off in a place there where I could catch the train to go back to Tokyo. But I remember one time flying in there, and there was a room when you get in the container park. It was full of caskets. Soldiers that had died were put on this helicopter to take them back to Japan. I'm thinking, how did that happen? I do remember one time getting choked up because the exhaust on that big helicopter, the engine was leaking down inside that compartment. Myself and several other people that was in that plane got all smoked up because of the exhaust. That was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Well, let's see. My first son was David, and he was born when I lived in Japan, and I came back, and we lived in an apartment complex on Harvard Avenue. Was the worst place we ever lived in our life. We had to share the bathtub and the toilets and everything with several other people that lived in the house. And we had a baby, and we had to change the diapers, get rid of the diapers and all that. We found a house on Denison Avenue in Memphis. Anyway, we lived there, and we had two more children, Mike and Van, and they were just really little squally things. They crawled over everything. I can remember they crawling on the floor, hands and feet, and you had to get them, bend over and pick them up. They would hold on to your finger, and you could walk with them. And then one day it dawned on me, why don't I get a stick, a pole, and let them use that? So I'd put the pole in their hand, they could walk with the pole. And they would have a time crawling around on the floor, and they pick the pole up and bring it over to me so I could hold them on the phone. They would walk, but they wouldn't walk. They wouldn't walk unless I had the pole in my hand. And then they finally learned how to walk, and they would run out in the backyard, play out there, and play in the side yard. And I think we had a dog at that time. I do know that when we lived on Denison, my mother had got me involved in collecting fish tank, putting ornaments in the bottom of a fish tank and putting some small fish in there. That was our big thing. And we had that, and David somehow or another cracked that fish tank open, and all the water and the fish came out on the floor. I had to clean all that up. Of course, I never had another fish tank, but that was just what I did. That was some of the things. I remember going to school with David and taking him over and walking to school back and forth with him until he learned how to do it himself. And then my sons, when we moved from Denison up onto Wooddale, we had a different point of going to school there. I don't remember what school they went to, but I would help them get ready early in the morning to go to school, and that was what I remember there. But in the backyard, I remember someone gave me a set of steps. It was ladder steps, and I took those and built a platform around a big tree we had there, and it was a playhouse for the boys. And those there were 3 boys then, and then Michael was the leader of the group. He thought he was the leader of the group. He would get up on top of those stairs, walk around and play around that little platform. Then Timothy was born, and they took care of him, and they'd take him out there and put him up on that platform. That was so weird. They would carry him around, had a bag. I remember they had a bag. I don't know where the bag came from. They would put him in the bag, take him out the front lawn. I remember that. For the first son was learning how to use alcohol. I didn't like that. Mike and Van were always fighting each other. Van was the one that read the most. He read books all the time. And Mike would just kind of play around with anything he wanted to. And then Tim, well, I call him Tim, he was the one that caused him most of the problems because he was so young. But the problem was we lived in this big house on Wooddale. It was on Wooddale, and we had a basement. And those little boys that get down and play in that basement and a concrete floor, I think it had tile on it, but Timmy grew up a little bit bigger. He would always have a kind of a wrestling match with Mike and Van. And then Mike got to a point he'd slap people around, and that's what he did. I know he always fought Timmy. When Timmy grew up, as Tim grew up, Mike would kind of punch him around. I remember that. And then David, we found out he smoked cigarettes, and I smoked cigarettes at that time, so we had to get him to stop smoking cigarettes. And let's see, that's about all I remember. I don't remember them having any girlfriends. There was just not a girlfriend thing for them, and I don't remember where they went to school, but that's what we did. We went to a church on off of Getwell there, and I don't remember where the church was. Anyway, it was a Baptist church, and they would go in there and sit down. They'd be real quiet. I remember doing that. That's about what I remember about the boys bringing up. Very proud of my children. They're all well off. They've made good children themselves. They've trained their children to speak the English language fluently, kept them out of trouble. David had 2 children, and Timothy had 7 children, and Mike had 2 children, and Van had 1 child. No, 2 children. And was it 1? I'm sorry, it was only 1 child. And it's a thing that you don't see too much today. With the world here we're in today, the cell phone and the electronic world have parted us in the sense that it's make us be, instead of meeting eyeball to eyeball like we used to do when we were children, the electronic world has gotten kids where they're doing texting and talking to each other on the phone. The television set is not the same thing we bought as a unit of entertainment, and it's just that we've come from a long time ago when we're having trouble today trying to adapt to the new generation. Oh, very much so, especially you. You're the smarty pants, and Rebecca is just. I think you and Rebecca will wind up being a business partners together somewhere with all this video conferencing thing you're doing now. Oh yeah, goodness gracious, those boys, that was a heartbreaker time in my life. I can remember going out with them. They'd stay here and sleep on this big couch, and they would wake up, or I'd wake up early in the morning, go out and get my coffee and come back in from McDonald's, and they would be awake by 7 or 8 o'clock, and I'd get up and take them to breakfast. And I remember one time that we went to a restaurant at noontime, And Adam was talking to Timmy. He said, "Now, Timmy, although we're in, no, I'm sorry, it was a Chinese restaurant." He said, "Although you're in a Chinese restaurant, just because you can read the menu, it doesn't mean you're going to learn. Just because you're going to eat the Chinese food does not mean you're going to be able to speak Chinese." That was a funny thing. And I remember in my printing business, someone gave me a bunch of plastic water pistols to print on. There was a green one, a yellow one, red one, and a clear painted one. And they only wanted to print on the red ones, or maybe the green ones. This was, I think, for Holiday Inn. So I printed on about 100 of those pistols. I mean, all the other colors, they just left them with me, another big box of them. So I brought them home one day, and I was out there playing in the backyard with those little boys, Timmy and Adam, shooting water on them. I gave them some guns. They came in the house, loaded them up, and shot me 100 times. And then another time I was there, they were out there playing in the backyard, and I took a box of those pistols, and they were laying on the ground. I dumped them on top of them. They thought that was funny. And I had to go out some mornings. There was some big rustling, leaves flapping, and something making a noise in the back lawn here. And Adam said, "Pops, what is that noise?" And I said, "It's just the black pig." "What do you mean the black pig?" "Well, we have a black pig that runs up and down the backyard here all the time." So we went to breakfast, and he came back, and he said, "I want to see the black pig." And I took him out there. Well, there was nothing out there. So I said, "Well, maybe he's over in one of the neighbors' yards." So they kept on going. They left the house here and went back home. Somehow or another, I was down on Highway 72 here in Mississippi, and I drove up into this lawn care house, this place where they sell trees and shrubbery, and they also sold statues. Well, they had this statue of the pig, and it had a broken nose, and I think it was like $100. So the guy said, "Well, I'll sell it to you for $50. You'll have to repair the nose." I thought, that won't be bad. So I had two guys help me pick up this heavy pig, put it in the back of my truck. Brought it home, and those boys were here. We put a big piece of carpet underneath the bottom of the pig, and we all picked that pig up, moved it out in the backyard, and I had them paint it black, because that's the Valley of the Black Pig there. And I wrote a story about the Valley of the Black Pig. It's all out there. And I made it in vinyl material, and I painted the brick on there white, laid that thing on there. I stuck all the letters on there, and they look even columns. And I peeled it off, sprayed it again with black, left the letters in white, peeled off each little letter. So it's a story about the Valley of the Black Pig, which is what I've told you. But that's what we did. And those little boys, they were heartbreakers, because sometimes I would help them do woodworking. We made about 25 birdhouses out of a deck that used to be out here on the backyard, back porch. And I cut the material up. And I'd cut the material up on the saw, and I would show them how to use the air gun, shoot a nail in it. They would do that. They would really go crazy on that. They like building that. But I don't know what happened to those 10 or 20 birdhouses I made. They were just made out of treated lumber, which the birds don't like. So no birds ever got in the birdhouse. I think I still have one in the backyard, but that's what we did. Sometime when we were driving, I had I don't know what kind of car I had. I think it was a van. We'd drive over where one street matched up to another street. There'd be a little valley here. I'd drive over it real fast. They'd bounce up and down in the back seat. And they liked that. They thought that was funny. That was the story of those little boys. The grandparent, I remember the one grandmother, she was a cook. She would always cook the food for us when we lived on Evelyn Avenue there. And she always dipped snuff. And she had this big pan. She dip stuff and she spit in it. And one day I was looking down into the cup to see what it looked like, and she spit on the back of my head. I thought, that's terrible. I didn't know that. And my mother used snuff also. They'd share that pan about spitting in it. So I remember in the movies seeing John Wayne or something like that in this bar, and these guys were spitting in this spittoon on the floor. So I just remember my grandmother having a spittoon. It was a big bucket, sometimes maybe tomatoes or something, and I don't know. I don't remember that. I know that I was working at a printing plant in Memphis, Tennessee, and I got a phone call saying that the babies had been born. I don't know if my mother called me or Amos Ann called me or what, but when I went back home, I had to fix supper or do something, and then I had to go to the hospital to see Ann, and that's when I found out we had twins. I don't remember anything about that. Those were the weird, those were the weird days of my life. I went to Tech High School in Memphis, Tennessee. Excuse me. My dad was in the printing business, working in a printing plant, maybe a commercial appeal. So I decided I wanted to be in the same business. So I went to Tech High School, and there was a fellow there named Smith. Mr. Smith was the instructor, and he smoked cigars all the time down to where the print shop was. And it stank all the time. I couldn't hardly stand him. Then about a month into the teaching there, a fellow named Charlie Brown came by. He was the assistant. Mr. Smith had him to be assistant. Well, they got rid of Mr. Smith and Mr. Brown's there. Well, me and 7 or 8 other boys, they were his students. All 8 of us, 9 of us owned printing plants. Mr. Brown, I just fell in love with him. He just, whatever he wanted to do, I'd say, just do it. And I had a Crosley car at that time. Mr. Brown lived in West Memphis, Arkansas, and I let him use my car, to go back and forth to work. And I just ride the bus to Tech High School. Wasn't anything to me. So he that's why I met up with him. But he needed a transportation. He only had girls. He owned a wife and girls. He didn't have any boys. So I guess him working in a print shop with all those boys, that must have, kind of got him excited. But I started out in the printing business as a linotype operator, which was okay. And my friend Carl Nelson was a linotype operator. And my other friend Bandit Anderson were linotype operators. And that's what we did. And all of us owned a printing plant. Somehow or another, well, Bennett didn't, but he worked at a very large printing plant. And they all made a lot of money. But it was a world of different printing at that time, where today you can get anything printed off a computer if you want to. And that was before the day of the computer. But the linotype machine has gone by the wayside. I still have some linotype mats, little brass mats in my shop out there that Bennett Anderson gave me. When he went in business for himself, he bought a linotype machine and bought all the mats and everything with it. The mat's what came down off the magazine into a belt, and it formed the words. When you make the cast, it comes up. And a holder goes down, the casting part would come up and cast the metal up in there, then it dropped down into a tray. The mats would go back up into the magazine. That's whoever made that mat, that rail on that magazine, those mats would fall back down to the original channel. Because I remember there was A, E, I, O, U, which were the vowels. I can't remember the first 2 keys at the top, but E, A, I, O, U was on the linotype machine. That's how and the big keyboard, about this big, made a lot of noise and smelled terrible all the time because you were in a lead room. It smelled like the lead was boiling in the pot all the time. But it was just something that we did. As a student, I learned how to do that. I'd like to go back to that time because that was a really nice time. But I'm too old now. Well, my travel throughout the years, I traveled from Memphis, Tennessee to Lewisburg, Mississippi. I worked for a bicycle company, and I used to take parts down there on my motorbike, leave them off at a service station. My next travel was going to Nashville, Tennessee with my friend Carl and Lionel Collins. And then I don't think I did more travel. I used to travel from Memphis to Hernando, Mississippi. That was on my motorbike also. That was really a scary thing because that was in 1952 and 53. Then I went into the military and I lived in Japan. And me, and I can't think of the man's name that was in the Army with me, we traveled all over Japan. We've been to Tokyo, Hiroshima, Sandusky, it's not Sandusky, I can't think of the name of it now, that was 60 years ago. But I can remember going to a place in Shinjuku, Japan, at the Takarazuka Theater. That's where all the men dressed up as women and they would dance and have a play. And that was really something to see those men do that. Then I went to another place in Japan, northern part, to watch the people in boat riding contests. They had a big ocean up there. After leaving Japan and coming back to this country and having been in the printing business, I worked for many different people. And then I opened my own business in 1974, and it was called Craftsman Screen Printing. And it was an international organization that we belonged to, Screen Printers Association. Sometime in 1970, having worked very hard in the printing business, worked very hard. And one day when I was coming back from downtown Memphis, Tennessee, back to my shop, my heart began to beat real hard and fast. And I went to my shop and I sat down at my desk and I basically decided that I was having a heart attack. So my wife and I went to see a doctor and I told them what it was about. And they immediately said, "You got heart surgery coming up." What? That's right. So in the 1980, I think it was, I had open heart surgery, and that was kind of a bad thing for me to do because it takes away all of your thinking of how you did when you were younger, when you were running around playing baseball, riding your bicycle, riding your motorcycle, and your heart and your brain were keeping these things going. Now then, I'm laying on a hospital bed and I can have these tubes hooked into me, and that was kind of depressing. Well, I went on and got rid of that, and then 12 years, maybe 14 years later, I had another open heart surgery, which I really despised, and I began to take some kind of medication for that.
Okay. Do you need some water? Is there any water in here?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's amazing how water really sparks you up.
Yeah, it does.
I can't imagine
Your
living
body's
in the
mostly
16th
water.
century and having to drink river water. I built a nice woodworking shop in behind this building. I like doing that. I'm not a creative woodworker as I once was, but I like to make little trinkets and toys, things like that, and pass them on. And I like to make things like, wait just a minute. This.
Might have to put it up a little bit closer. Like, and move it closer to the camera.
Move it close.
Sorry, I shouldn't have laughed.
Now this is made out of a piece of flooring. It's a really flooring support. Piece of paper. This is some of the things I make. And really, if you want to do exercise and you don't care to go to the gym, which is going to cost you $15 to $20 a month, you can get you a block of wood and walk around the block 2 times. And people say, what did you do today? And you can say, well, I walked around the block 2 times and sat down and took a rest.
Alrighty, well, anything else you want to go over? I think we should kind of wrap it up. The sun's going down. We're losing
Okay.
the lighting.
Lighting? Well, I'm kind of tired of answering your silly questions.
Oh, wow.
That's okay. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. What is one thing I'm especially proud of? 63 years of marriage, which I think anybody that stays married knows, and if they're working at it, then they know that every year deserves a blue ribbon, because it's the hardest thing people do, and but the blessings from it are just multiple, and that's the point. So yeah, I'm proud of being married that long. What brings me joy? Seeing these little ones, whether I see them in person or on Facebook or on a video, or I hope I'm going to be seeing more on Skype or something like that. It's just, there's no joy on this earth that could be any better than that. They are all beautiful, and I mean, nobody can argue about that. They're all absolutely beautiful or handsome in the case of the boys, which we don't have many boys, but that's okay too. They are smart, oh my goodness, and funny. I do wish that they could all be friends, that they were geographically closer so that they could all be friends, because cousins are the best. They're your friends from start to finish. Number one, seriously consider your spiritual life. Seriously consider your eternity. And after that, for life here on earth, which of course the first thing highly affects that, the second thing, but communicate, and be aware of what the other person, whoever you're trying to communicate with, if it's a boss or a husband, try to be understanding, try to not be selfish, because that's our first tendency, is to see everything as if it was all about us. We all do that. Christian, non-Christian, everybody does that. And it's just not beneficial. A lot of times it's not. And if we can try to see all sides, and yeah, and communication, like I said, that is really important, but also, like I said, the very first thing that's most important is your own spiritual life. Who is Anne? Anne is a Christian. Anne is a reader. That's my hobby, my passion, and my escape from the doldrums. Hobbies. My hobby is reading. I really don't have another one. I like mysteries and thrillers and generally worthless fiction. But I enjoy that. I do enjoy reading Christian books of different kinds. But mostly I read to just escape. My mother used to do the same thing. It's just, it's La La Land, I guess, and you learn so much depending on where the book is set in the world and that kind of thing. So that's what I enjoy doing. But as far as me as a whole person, I'm Christian. I love Bible study. I've been in Bible study a long, long time, and it's meant a lot to me, and I enjoy doing that. I enjoy the people I know there, and I'd say that pretty much covers it, other than, of course, being, most importantly, a wife and a mother and a grandmother and a great-grandmother. My plans for the future, as far as the future here on earth, I am here at the pleasure of the Lord. Like they say in the White House, I'm here at the pleasure of the president, but I'm here at the pleasure of the Lord. My times are in His hands. Probably, one thing in particular comes to mind. Our fourth child, whose name was Philip, was born brain damaged. He was perfect in every other way, but his brain just never developed, and consequently he had no recognition of anybody or anything, and he lived from March 20th of 1961 to March 20th of 1962 to February 4th of 1963. So he was not quite 11 months old. And he grew bigger. He was the size of a normal 11-month-old child, but he had no recognition of anything, and he was blind, and it was a year out of our lives that is really vague, except for taking care of him. And so when he died, it was very sad, but on the other hand, I was glad that I could think that he was in heaven, and feel sure of that. And to know that he didn't have to live a life that would have not been a blessing for him or for anybody. So that was the hardest thing. Yeah, that was definitely the hardest thing I ever went through. I would most like to be remembered for being a Christian, for people that know me best to think, to know, to remember that that was important to me, to live as Christ would have me to live. It's nothing that you can do to make things any better than you are the day you're saved, but there's still a striving for to live in the way that would glorify him. And I want my family to know that, first of all, but also to know that I had compassion and mercy, and I had that because of God's grace. And because when I think back to how I might have responded in some situations against how I did respond in some situations, that God gets the glory for that. So that would be my fondest thought, would be that my family would know that was important to me. I went through years of going to church. It was how I grew up. My parents didn't go to church, but a couple of my aunts took me to church. So it's like I knew the gospel intellectually from my earliest years. But then as time went on, I did what a lot of people do. And this was after we were married and the kids came. We just quit going to church. I quit going to church, so therefore everybody else quit going to church too. And so I was working full time, and a friend of mine, for the second time, told me about a Bible study for women that worked. And the first time she told me, I thought, oh, good grief, I don't want to do that. And then the next year, when she told me about it, I was at a very low point in my life, very vulnerable and very needy. And so I said, yeah, I'll try that. And so I signed up. I went to sign up, and there were at least 300 women in the sanctuary of this church. And I nearly fainted at that, but nevertheless, I signed up. And so then a lady called me that week and said that I'd be in her group. And so I said, okay. And but the day that I was supposed to go, it was raining and I had a headache. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. And the next thing I knew, I was driving across Perkins from Parkway Village, where we lived, to Christ Methodist Church, where the class was held. And so that was the beginning of my really close path to salvation. because as soon as I heard the word taught that night, it was God talking directly to me. And we were in the book of Matthew, and it was just directly to me. And every week it was like that. And that was in 1982. And I have been in either that Bible study or another one just like it ever since. And that fall of 1982, when I was 45 years old, is when God really saved me. Because the Word, His Word, will do that. It's the power of God. And so that's my story in a tiny nutshell. I guess regrets. Definitely, yes. I have many regrets about how I parented my children because I was working most of those years, and I could have still done better as a mother if, even though I was working, because a lot of people do. And I know that now. It's, I don't know, it seems to me like there was a different mindset or something, or maybe it was my circles or my family or something, I don't know. But I didn't spend the quality time and see to it that they had certain things like music. I mean, Tim took part in sports. He's my only child that liked sports, and I did do that with him. I did. That's when I learned anything that I know about football, was when he was a child and doing football. But Mike and Van, I know now, both should have had music. They should have had music lessons because Mike can sing. Van may be able to sing, I don't know, but Mike can sing. He sings in the choir. And I know that Van probably would have played an instrument, a guitar, most likely, or something, but I didn't see to it that happened. I was just busy taking care of me, I think. I don't know. Anyway, that's my regret. Yes, that's my big regret. My biological father wasn't with us. My mother divorced him when I was an infant. And then when I was 5 years old, she married my stepdad. My favorite relatives were my aunts, my mother's sisters, because we lived in the house with them when I was really small, and then again later on we did. Elizabeth was just older than Mother. Actually, I think there was another brother between Elizabeth and Mother, and but Elizabeth would take me interesting places, and she worked downtown, and we would sometimes, if there was somebody there with a car, we would drive downtown to pick her up when she got off work, and there was a hotel close to her work, and we would stop in there and have a piece of pie. And of course that was a major treat for me.
How old were you about that?
Probably 6, 7, along in there, and so that was really special, and we were just really close, and then my mother's younger sister, that was only 18 months younger than her, Elva, she I guess because she seemed so young, and she was she liked to dance, and I used to watch her and her girlfriends in the living room doing boogie woogie dances and all that, and it was just, they were just fun people. This was all during the time that I guess it was before she had children, because her oldest son is only 5 years younger than me, and but it would have been during the time before she got married and had Jimmy. So but those two, I think, I really liked all of my relatives. My mother's oldest sister was kind of scary because she was the boss. She was the boss of the family. And she's the one we called sister. But I loved all of them. They were just fun people. So I can't say there were any that I didn't really enjoy being with. My first job was as a clerk in a dime store that was on Main Street, Silver's. Silver's 5 and 10 was the name of it, and it was on Main Street, and it had a door on Main Street, but then right next to it was the nicest jeweler that was in Memphis, Broadnax, and the dime store made an L around the Broadnax, and so there was a door on Monroe as well. And I would just go there from high school, and because I was 16, I got that job probably at the Christmas that I was in 10th or 11th grade, whatever, probably 10th. And I worked there, and I really enjoyed it, of course, because it was so different and from anything that I'd ever done. And so I rode the streetcar. We had streetcars that ran down the middle of the street on tracks with a thing on top that attached to an electric wire. So I just zip would go home on that. Took maybe 15, 20 minutes was all. And but I would usually work 4 to 9 because it would close at 9. And the manager, when I was working, was a fairly young guy, and he was handsome. And so I thought he was pretty cute and pretty interesting. But that was as far as that went. I probably never talked to him except to say yes, sir, when he would tell me what to do. So, but it was fun. I had that job I had it after Christmas. I remember being there on through the spring. So I didn't just work the Christmas season. It was longer than that, but not a whole lot longer. So I can't remember why I quit or they let me go. So. Well, I can't remember meeting him because my earliest memory was of him and his family as neighbors. And I remember him as a little boy with lots of blonde curls. And if I could find it, I know he came to a birthday, to an Easter egg hunt, because somewhere I have a picture of just a row of us kids on our street that were there at my house having an Easter egg hunt. So we were probably 4 and 6 at that point. So that was quite young, and so I've just always known him. My wedding, Joel had been to boot camp for the Army. He joined the Army in early 1956. He left like in January, I think, or no, anyway, I don't know, early 56. And then when he came back from boot camp for his few days off, a week or 10 days, I think, he said he would probably be sent to the school that he wanted to go to was for lithography printing, and it was at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. So he thought he would be sent there for the next 5 or 6 months. And so we just suddenly decided to get married so that maybe I could go there with him. And I think we decided on Monday, and we got married on Saturday. And because we could come to Hernando and get married in one day, whereas in Memphis you had to go and get a license and have a blood test and wait 3 days for the blood test and all that. And so instead we just decided to go to Hernando to get married. And the day of our wedding, or the day before, probably the day before, we went to Hernando and saw that we got a license and everything, and we saw the Methodist church, and it was on Commerce Street at the time. It's been made into condos now because the Methodist church is around on Mount Pleasant in Hernando now. And but we went in and met the preacher and and he agreed to marry us. And so then we came back to Memphis. During the week I had found a little dress, a little pink dress that was pretty and looked bridey. And and I asked Betty Taylor, except she was Betty Van Landingham at the time, and I asked her to be my maid of honor, and he asked his buddy that had joined the Army, they had joined the Army together, Bill Lott, to be his best man. And so we trekked down to Hernando with just a few people. Joel's brother went and he took a few pictures, and I had my mother, and I think Elva went, but very few of my family went. I believe Mary got to go. Anyway, we got married, and I guess some more of our friends were there because we decided that we had to go to Leonard's Barbecue to get food. Afterward, they had a drive-in in Memphis at Bellevue and I can't remember the side street, but Macklemore, Bellevue Macklemore. And so we were in the car together, and everybody else was in somebody else's car, one of our other friends. And so we were driving along and talking, and I guess perhaps the conversation got into an area that was uncomfortable for my friend Betty, and she popped up from the back seat where she was hiding and said, "I don't want to hear that," or something like that. And we both screamed, and and so we went on from there and got together with our friends. But that was memorable, and we have talked to Betty about that numerous times. But yeah, that was our wedding.
That's funny.
Well, I worked for an architectural firm, Mayan and Shapley, downtown, and Mr. Mayan was from Marianna, Arkansas, and there's a lake over by Marianna called Bear Creek, and his brother owned the lodge that was there, and so my boss, Mr. Mayan, gave us 2 nights at that lodge for our wedding present, which was real sweet. And so we went over there for 2 days, and there was another fairly young couple there, and so we buddied up with them some, and it was nice. It was a very nice lodge, and they had very good food, and so that was a nice thing that we got to do. And then we came back, and I guess 2 days later he left, and I did not get to go to Fort Belvoir. Oh my goodness. Best memory together.
Dancing.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Joel. I guess the last 2 years of high school, we would go every Friday or Saturday night to this girl's house and just have a dance party. I mean, her mother and daddy were there, and they wanted her friends to come, and so we would just have, Cokes and chips or something like that, and but we danced up a storm. All of us liked to dance. There was probably about 10 of us that went, and Joel and I were the only real couple, and other than that, it was just different girls and guys, and we did that for a couple of years, and went, we'd go on picnics out to Shelby Forest and stuff like that. Lots of activities that were fun. If we could manage to be unaccounted for, we would drive the streets, like Cruising Maine or something like that you've seen in teenage movies. And one night we were on South Parkway, and Elvis drove by us. He was in the car. He was in a big limo. At the time, he was just beginning to get rich and famous, and he always was out at night because it was beginning to be uncomfortable for him to try to go many places. So, but we did. We saw him. We were excited. I saw him before that, before he was famous, but he was beginning to make records. There was a record store on Main Street, and I worked on Madison, but I would go to lunch well, probably I would go shopping, and he would be standing out in front of that record store most of the time with George Klein, who was his best friend, and actually George died like just a couple of weeks ago. So he lasted all these many years, longer than Elvis did, but they were good friends, and I never actually met him, but I saw him several times before he was famous, and then that time we saw him on South Parkway, and then Mary and I guess, went to one of his first concerts in Memphis, and he was one of those people that was electric when he performed. There was just the two people that I know of in my lifetime that I saw perform that were that way was him and Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was unbelievably talented, and he could put on a show, oh my word. So, those two. But I felt like I knew Elvis. I think everybody in Memphis felt like they knew Elvis. So, well, I remember my biological father did go to the Army, and he had been living somewhere else in Nashville or something. He may have been in jail. I think maybe he was in jail at the time, but he had written a letter saying that he thought that the government should let nonviolent offenders get out of jail and go to war. Anyway, he managed to do that. So I'm not really sure that he ever left the country though. But he came to see me, one of the few times he came to see me before he left. And so I remember that, and I remember that my mother's youngest brother, L.H. Doyle, went to the South Pacific, and he was gone at least 4 years, and he was in the war, and so we were always, I remember that we were just always conscious of what was happening in the South Pacific because he was there. And I remember them saying the war was ended and how excited everybody was, and then he got to come home, and he was very fortunate. He was never wounded, I don't think, at all. But he was only 12 years older than me, so he was like a big brother when I was quite young. But anyway, those are the main things I remember about World War II, was the personal stuff and just being aware that it was happening. So, well, I was very glad it was over when Joel joined the Army, because it had ended not too long before he went over there. And of course he was in Japan, and I think things may have been slightly, of course the Americans were over the Japanese, so to speak, but yet not to put our foot on their neck or anything like that. It was just repatriating and maintaining peace and so forth, while during those years after the war. And so Joel was over right in Tokyo from September of 56 to September of 58. He was gone 25 months. And during that time, I was pregnant when he left, but we didn't know it right. We didn't know it right when he left. Yeah, David was 16 months old when he came back.
So he didn't. Well, I guess you wrote to him and stuff, so he knew he had a boy and all that.
Yeah, they sent him. Mother sent him a telegram, and which we still have somewhere.
Definitely gonna need a copy of that.
Yeah, I need to find some stuff. Ooh,
I'll help you.
Joel hated it. He's just structurally not made for that type of life at all. And I pretty much was not very happy either. I mean, because what they promised him before he went in is not what happened. But it really didn't affect us that much because he came back in September of 58, and we went to Fort Sill in Oklahoma, just above Texas, and and we stayed there until Christmas, and until almost Christmas, and then we came home, and he had 30 days leave. He had a lot of leave built up, so he had 30 days leave. So we decided that David and I would just stay in Memphis, and he would be there with us until 30 days before he could get out, which was March 15th or something like that. And so that's what we did. My aunt Elizabeth was in the hospital at the time, long-term situation, and we lived in her apartment that she was hanging on to. We lived in her apartment, which was just a few blocks from Mother, and I went back to work to the same company I had been working for, and then he went to Fort Sill and got his discharge, and right at the same time, we bought our first house at 1799 Denison in Memphis. So when he got released, he came back, and he had been working for his brother on that short period of time that he was here, and he went back to work for his brother, Bob, and we started living our lives. Yeah, at that time, I was working at Southern Cotton Ginners, because when I went to work for them in February of 67, and that happened with Martin Luther King in April of 68. We had just moved to our building that we still have at right by the Memphis, Arkansas bridge. And so consequently, we were in South Memphis to work, and we had two employees from Arkansas that rode the bridge every day to come to work, and I was working part-time at that time, I guess, because Mother and I had just been to the grocery store. It was a Thursday or a Friday, and I had dropped her off at home, got her groceries in, and as soon as I got home, which was 10 minutes away, she called and told me, no, that might have been Kennedy I'm thinking of. Regardless, we had been to the grocery store with both of those, and so she called and told me that had happened and that they had already said there would be a curfew, and and all of that kind of thing. And so Monday came and everybody was really nervous and all. But I went to work, and one of the girls from Arkansas went to work, and one of them, her husband wouldn't let her come to work. And we were just, when something like that happens, you almost can't work. Everybody is just like when 2011 occurred. People stop working because it's such a shocking thing. And we were standing looking out the window, and there was a house. We were right by a neighborhood, still there, called French Fort neighborhood. And there was a field that is attached to a Memphis park over there, because we're so near the river. And there's a park there, and there's Indian mounds and all of that. And we saw a group of young men walking our way. There was probably 5 of them. That was the only time that I was frightened. I don't know if anybody else was frightened. We always kept our door locked. We just did, because people came off the bridge and wanted to panhandle sometimes, But anyway, those young men just walked. They were just walking. I don't know where they were going, but they weren't coming to see us. And they just walked through the motel lot, which was across from us, and kept going. And that was really the only time. It was a really horrifying situation to me, because I had seen when Kennedy died what it did to people in Dallas, and you just have that stigma over your city from then on. It never goes away. So anyway, but that's all I can really remember about that. Oh my goodness. So many of my friends know all the words to the rock and roll, because we were teenagers when rock and roll started, and our dance was always called the bop. I was never good at anything else. Pops is a wonderful dancer. He's very good. But I don't know. There were some in the in 55, 56 that were so fun and so good. There were Earth Angel and Rock Around the Clock and all of those. Elvis, Heartbreak Hotel, and I can kind of sing along with them if they come on now, but I have friends that, know every word to this day, and I'm not like that. I haven't retained those that much. So I put too much else in on top of it, I guess. David, my first, he was just a really sweet baby. He was a good baby. And of course, I did go to work, and my mother kept him. I was very fortunate. He was very serious as he began to walk and grow up and talk and so forth. And he was definitely a big brother. As time went on, not too sweet a big brother, but still a big brother. But he was always a very serious kid. And then Mike and Van came along, and they were, of course, sick. We went through a lot of terrible stuff to begin with them, because they got staph infection. That's when Baptist Hospital was absolutely full of staph infection. I think everybody got it when they were there. And so anyway, we struggled with it from the time they were born until after Van was 4 years old. We had to even go through surgery with Van right at 4 years old. And then finally, we were done with it. And they were pretty funny. They were hilarious kids. They're still hilarious. They're both just have it. They have, they're smart. All four of my kids are very, very smart. And so they're smart and they're funny. And then we had Philip, and he was brain damaged, and that was a tough time for us, very tough, the worst. And then after we lost Philip, I got pregnant real quick with Tim, and that was in '63, and he was born in December of 1963. And when he was born, David and Mike and Van had the mumps, and they went straight into chickenpox. And so Tim had one tiny little bump on his belly, and he has never had chickenpox full blown, so I don't know if that gave him immunity or not, but that was what was happening. And the doctors were pretty horrified when I told them, And then when he was 9 months old, he developed an illness just overnight. He was very lethargic, and his mouth was drooping on one end. And of course, my mother and Joel's mother just freaked out because they thought we were fixing to lose another child, and they were both so upset. And of course we were too, but that time he was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days, and that time I could stay with him, whereas when Mike was little, he was too little and he needed ICU care, so. But anyway, it turned out to be the disease that's called sleeping sickness, encephalitis. It was encephalitis, that's right, thank you. But they didn't know what type, and there were at least 3 different types, and one of them was as a side effect of a childhood disease. And we had not had anything just right away before that. It was, like I said, it was September. And, but it scared us pretty bad. And so he got over it pretty quick, and so we still didn't know. Months later, I get this phone call with the blood report saying that it was a St. Louis variety, which is from mosquitoes. but they had a child on the next floor down from us that had been there in a coma for 9 months, and I was just horrified, for those people. But anyway, that was I do believe it changed him slightly, because he was kind of easygoing before that, and it seemed to me that he revved up quite a bit after that. After he had that, he became much more hyper, not fully hyperactive, but pretty close to it. Some of his teachers thought he was hyperactive as time went on. But anyway, we got past that, and so then they just started growing up. Tim was the only one that was ever really interested in sports, although Mike and Van did play t-ball and a little bit of baseball stuff, but Tim was the only one that was really serious about sports. And I learned to like football when he was doing football. And I went back to work when Tim was 4. I had quit working when Philip was born. So I had been off work for 5 years, and we were pretty poor. So when I got the chance to work part-time, I took it. And but the guys, life was not easy. But I can remember sitting in the living room floor with all 4 of them right there doing this, that, and the other. And I just thought, 4 kids is not that many. And because people would say, 4 kids, and like they've said 7 kids to you, your mama. And but they were great. We had some hard times, no doubt. Teenage, late teenage, yuck, yuck, yuck. But all in all, it was good. And they now are all my pride and joy. So that's my kids. Childhood diseases were just so common. We had measles. Now we had German measles, which was easy. That's the kind that a pregnant woman should try to avoid, very much so, because it apparently at that time they felt sure that it would affect your baby, but it was definitely the scariest, because I myself had gone through a spell of it, and I can still remember it. I was 10, and it was awful. But we had chicken pox, and we had mumps, and people, the kids, they would feel bad for several days, and have fever and chicken pox, and it was miserable because chicken pox is so itchy. And any of the ones with a rash were so itchy, but chicken pox is the worst. And so you would just have to try to keep them, from clawing themselves and stuff. But no, they were just common, and kids, in our experience, nobody died of that. They might develop a side effect as such, the encephalitis, and that might kill somebody, meningitis type thing, but once we got past that staff curse, that was really the scariest thing we had. And to this day, that's a terrible infection to have, viral. I think probably the standard ones, especially the church songs, because we were going to church. We started going to church, I guess, when Mike and Van were pretty small. And we went then all the way through to, we moved there in 59 and we left in 69 and moved to Wooddale. But the people next door and us went to the same church called Beverly Hills Baptist. It was over on Kimball. And it was a nice sized little church, lots of people our age. And there were 3 families that had twins that had been born during the same 6 months. So, but one of them lost one of theirs because he fell off and they were all boys. But this one fell off the bed before we knew him. He was 5 months old and he fell off the bed and it killed him. So sad. But the 5 of them were pretty close, definitely pretty close because they were all the same age, you know. But I would sing mostly children's church songs, you know, and I can't remember any particular thing. They might could, but I doubt it. But I do remember that we had a record player in the dining room end of our living room, and I used to buy albums, in particular show albums like Sound of Music, and sing along with them, but I don't know that the kids paid any attention to it. I don't think I know of one most impactful, although to be rather cliche, Gone with the Wind and To Kill a Mockingbird, and actually John Grisham's first book, which was his very best one, I think, was A Time to Kill, and that was that was a good book. But of course, I love books that have a love story somewhere in them. And I've read back when I was just a young mother, young adult, I don't know, Mary and I both probably started reading those books at the same time, by an author called Ellsworth Thane. And she had this series of books that was a family going through, starting with the Revolutionary War and then the Civil War, and every one of them was a war was the central thing, but there was family story and love story to go with it. Okay, the Ellsworth Thane series, which I don't even know if you can find anymore. I don't think you can. Those were great, but impactful is a big word, and I don't feel like most of that was impactful, not like scripture is impactful. So I just have to stick to the Bible. But I love to read, and I like mostly a lot of the same kind of books, but through my life I've read a variety. And I've read some Michener books that were really good, like the one on Hawaii, the way he describes right at the beginning how Hawaii was formed back in so many millions, according to him, so many millions of years ago. But it was amazing to read it. So there's just been too many, too many. Oh boy, I could have easily been a part of the Me Too movement. And I would venture to guess that at least 80 to 90% of women that have worked in close proximity to men in their lives, my age and younger, would say the same thing. It was, I hate to say it because it makes me sound so wimpy, but it was just part of what you dealt with. Just part of the bleep that you dealt with in working life. And if it was bad enough, then you did something about it. But I put up with a lot of stuff that nowadays women would not put up with. So that is number one. But on the other hand, I got respect. I had self-respect. It gave me some respect from other people, and I enjoyed that. Because when I grew up, that was unheard of, you know. My mother was funny and overworked, mainly because she had 4 more children after me. I was 7.5 when Mary was born, and before that we pretty much lived with her family a lot of the time, and then she married William when I was 5, and then I was 7.5 when she started having their family, but she had also lost a couple of babies in between that time. So physically, she was probably worn out most of the time. But she was, she had a great sense of humor. She never finished, I think she finished 10th grade, because she did go to Central High School for a little while. So she finished 10th grade, but that was as far as she went. And, but she read books just a lot. So she and I had a special bond, I think, because it was just us, you know, for a while. So, and my biological father, I only saw a few times, like 3 or 4 times in my life, and so I never lived with him that I remember. But William, that mother married, he was the only father I ever knew, and he was a funny guy too, and but our life was pretty hard. It was hard to keep a job and during that time, during our growing up time, Mother had to work periodically, and since she didn't have much of an education, she would always work in a drugstore. That's almost every job I knew of that she had. And of course, drugstores were different then than they are now. But anyway, she did that, and as I was older, I would take care of the kids while she worked, to help her. But basically, it was just a regular life. It was just, we lived in a neighborhood, mostly close to Midtown, and always in Midtown. Rephrase that. And it was like a small town, I think, and so it was just a regular life. It was just poor, but most people were poor, so it was okay. But my mother was a very good cook, and just a regular cook, nothing fancy at all. And but anyway, I miss her. Even till now, I miss how she was until like 3 years before she died, because she had dementia, and so her personality just left. Her face was just expressionless. And but I miss how she was earlier on. I used to take her to Dallas to see Mary, or we'd meet halfway or something, and those trips, sometimes Elva would go with us, and we'd do a lot of laughing, and so I have very fond memories of all that. Well, my grandmother, I didn't know but one set of grandparents, and that was my mother's mother and dad. And she died in 42, like November, I think, of 42, so I was only 5. But I can mainly remember her in a hospital bed in the front bedroom. And I could, when the ice cream man would come by, I could always run in and get a nickel from her. Where in the world she was able to have those nickels from, I don't know. But anyway, I do remember that. I have one very vague memory of her cooking in the kitchen, which had to have been several years before she died. And she made a sweet potato pie that was chewy, and I think I've tried to do it since I grew up, and I never have been totally successful at it, but that's one of the main things I remember that she cooked: turnip greens and sweet potato pie. But I just remember a lot of love from her, more than much speech. She had congestive heart failure, and in those days there wasn't a thing in the world you could do but lay down and die, because they thought that was what you do. If your heart's failing, then lay down. And it turns out that's not what you do at all. But in those days it was. I was 42. So, and then after she died, my grandfather, who was, he's the only person I can ever remember spanking me. And he spanked me because I opened the gate and let the chickens in the garden. and this was a serious matter in those days. But I didn't feel mistreated at all. I mean, that spanking was earned. So, but he was tall and skinny, and his son LH, my uncle, closest to me in age, he was very, very much like him. And, but anyway, and so at the time, he died when I was 10. And so he lived 5 years after his wife had died. And it was a Sunday morning when he died, and Mother had just fixed his breakfast when we got back. I got back from church with Sister and her kids, and Mary was here. She had already been born, and I guess Cookie too. Anyway, we were all in the front room because Sister was making me a piano recital dress, or going to, and we heard him hit the floor. But he had the kind of a heart attack that they told you when you had your second one, they would say, when you have your next one, you're gone. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And they said he was dead before he hit the floor, but I can just remember the turmoil, and I was very, very sad for a good while, because he was, I don't really remember that much conversation, but he was a really a person of strength in my memory, and so I have great love for both of them. And sorry, I never knew my other grandparents, but the ones I had were wonderful. In my life, I'm most grateful for my relationship with Jesus, because it affects every other part of life, and it makes life more rich and more meaningful. And past him, I would be most grateful for my family. My children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren are just a joy. They're just a joy in my life, and I don't get to see them all very much, but that's okay. I keep up with them, and I pretty much know what's going on with them most of the time, and I'm grateful for that. So, yeah, I would say on this earth, my family I'm most grateful for.
Okay, well, I don't have any more questions for you. Is there anything else you want to...
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for making this video of me, and to tell my children, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren what it was like to be the patriarch of the Hairston clan. How about that? Is that something I can be proud of? Yes. But thank you for doing the video, and I hope you turn out to be pretty good with you and Rebecca doing some more of this within your family, because that's what's going to happen. And we understand that, I think Miss Ann said, you're leaving us after this video, so I won't cry right now, but after you leave, I'm going to cry.
I'll probably cry before we leave.
Thank you. I remember when I was dating my wife, and she was really good looking, and she was only about this thin. Now she's this big, and I think, maybe this big, I think I made a good investment. At any rate.